Dad, perfect events. I was lying on the cold concrete floor of my trucking company office when the crushing pain hit my chest, like a freight train slamming into a brick wall. The wrench I'd been using to fix a hydraulic leak on one of my Peterbilts clattered to the ground as my knees buckled. This wasn't indigestion from that gas station burrito I'd grabbed for lunch. This was the big one. My name is Gerald Pierce. I'm 58 years old, and for the past 35 years, I've built Pierce Transportation from a single beat-up truck into a $28 million empire with rigs rolling across all 50 states. I'm a former Marine who knows the difference between equipment failure and a human body that's trying to shut down on you. And brother, mine was definitely trying to shut down. The pain was like nothing I'd ever experienced, even during my 2 tours in Iraq. It felt like someone had wrapped barbed wire around my heart and was slowly tightening it with pliers. My left arm went completely numb and sweat was pouring down my face despite the October chill in the air. I managed to fumble my phone out of my coveralls pocket with shaking fingers and hit 911. My voice sounded like gravel when I wheezed out my address to the dispatcher. "Stay on the line, sir," she said. "Help is on the way." But I didn't stay on the line. I hung up and did what any father and husband would do. I called my family. I needed to hear a familiar voice, someone who cared whether I lived or died. My wife Margaret's phone went straight to voicemail. She was probably at that fancy country club again, having lunch with her friends and complaining about being married to a truck driver instead of some corporate executive in a suit. So I called my daughter Carol. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. The pain in my chest was getting worse with each ring, like someone was tightening that barbed wire another notch. "Dad?" She finally answered, and immediately I could hear loud music and laughter in the background. It sounded like a party. "Carol, listen to me," I wheezed, forcing each word out through the crushing pressure. "I'm having a heart attack. I'm at the office. Call 911 and get down here now." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then I heard her sigh. The kind of exaggerated sigh you give when someone's asking you to do something inconvenient. "Dad, you're being dramatic again. Tyler says you probably just ate something greasy from one of those truck stops. You know you shouldn't have that kind of food at your age." Tyler, my son-in-law, the 33-year-old MBA who'd never worked a real job in his life but somehow had opinions about everything I did. "Carol, this isn't food poisoning," I gasped, my vision starting to blur around the edges. "My left arm is completely numb. I can barely breathe. Please." "Look, Dad." Her voice dropped to an annoyed whisper, like she was trying not to let other people hear her conversation. "Tyler's presenting our new tech startup to some very important Silicon Valley investors right now. This could literally change our entire future. We're talking about a $50 million valuation." I closed my eyes, fighting against the darkness that was creeping in from the corners of my vision. "Carol, I think I'm dying. Can't this wait a couple hours? We'll check on you after the investor meeting wraps up. Tyler says these guys are flying back to California tonight, so this is our only shot." The line went dead. I stared at my phone, lying there on the oil-stained concrete floor. My own daughter had just hung up on me while I was having a massive heart attack because her husband's business presentation was more important than her father's life. The sound of sirens was getting closer, wailing through the industrial district where I'd built my trucking empire one contract at a time. Mrs. Rodriguez from the auto repair shop next door must have seen me collapse through the office window and called for help when she couldn't get me to respond to her knocking. The paramedics burst through the door like a SWAT team, all business and urgency. They didn't care that I was just a truck driver. They didn't care about my bank account or my social status. They saw a man in trouble and they went to work. "We've got you, sir," one of them said as they cut away my coveralls and attached monitoring equipment to my chest. "Stay with us." As they loaded me onto a stretcher and wheeled me toward the ambulance, all I could think about was that empty silence on the phone after Carol hung up. That sigh of annoyance, like I was interrupting something important with my inconvenient medical emergency. The ambulance ride to St. Mary's Hospital was a blur of flashing lights, urgent voices, and pain that seemed to radiate through every cell in my body. But worse than the physical pain was the realization that was settling into my mind like poison. My family didn't care if I lived or died. They cared about money and status and impressing investors, but the man who'd provided all of that for them was just an inconvenience when he needed them most. The emergency room was controlled chaos. doctors and nurses moved around me with practiced efficiency, shouting medical terms I didn't understand. Someone was cutting off the rest of my clothes. Someone else was inserting IV lines into my arms. The heart monitor was beeping erratically, like Morse code for this old man is in serious trouble. Dr. Adams, the cardiac surgeon, leaned over me with tired but kind eyes. "Mr. Pierce, you've had what we call a massive myocardial infarction. That's a fancy way of saying your main heart artery is completely blocked. We need to get you into surgery immediately." "How bad?" I managed to croak. "Bad enough that you're lucky to be alive. We're going to do everything we can, but I won't lie to you. This is touch and go." He looked around the trauma bay. "Is your family here? We'll need someone to sign consent forms and be available for medical decisions if complications arise during surgery." I tried to speak, tried to explain that my family was busy with something more important. But the words wouldn't come. A nurse named Betty, who reminded me of my drill sergeant's wife back at Camp Pendleton, patted my arm gently. "Don't you worry about that right now, honey. We'll take care of the paperwork. You just focus on staying strong." As they wheeled me toward the operating room, I caught a glimpse of the clock on the wall. 7:30 p.m. Tyler's investor meeting should have been over by now. Carol and Margaret should have been rushing through those hospital doors, demanding to know if I was okay. But the hallways were empty except for medical staff. My family was somewhere else, probably celebrating Tyler's successful presentation, toasting to their bright future with champagne I'd paid for. The anesthesia mask came down over my face, and the last thing I remember thinking before everything went black was a promise to myself. If I survived this surgery, if I woke up from this table, things were going to be different. I was done being the family ATM. I was done being taken for granted. They wanted to live without me interfering in their important business. Fine. I'd give them exactly what they wanted. But the price of admission to that new life was going to be a lot higher than they ever imagined. I woke up 3 days later in the cardiac ICU with tubes coming out of my chest and the steady beep of heart monitors keeping time like a mechanical drummer. My throat felt like I'd been gargling gravel, and every breath was a reminder that my ticker had tried to quit on me. The first face I saw wasn't Margaret's or Carol's. It was Nurse Betty, checking my IV drip and marking something on my chart. "Well, look who decided to rejoin the living," she said with a smile that actually reached her eyes. "You gave us quite a scare there, Mr. Pierce." "How are you feeling? Like I got run over by one of my own trucks," I croaked. "That's about right. You've been in and out for 72 hours. The surgery went well, but you've got a long recovery ahead of you." I looked around the room. 2 chairs sat empty by the window. "Has anyone been by to see me?" Betty's expression tightened just a little. "Your son-in-law stopped by yesterday afternoon, left some flowers." She nodded toward a small bouquet on the windowsill that looked like it came from a gas station. "What about my wife? My daughter?" "No, honey, just him." Tyler had visited once in 3 days. Margaret and Carol hadn't shown up at all. That should have hurt worse than the surgical incisions across my chest. But instead, it just made me angry. Around 2 p.m., Tyler finally strutted into my room wearing a $1,000 suit and that politician's smile he'd perfected over the years. He was carrying a leather briefcase and checking his phone like he had somewhere more important to be. "Hey there, Pops," he said, barely glancing up from his screen. "Good to see you awake. Sorry we couldn't make it sooner. This whole investor situation has been absolutely crazy." He pulled up one of the empty chairs, but didn't sit down. Instead, he set his briefcase on it and clicked it open. "Actually, the timing kinda worked out. While you were sleeping off the surgery, I had a chance to really dive into the trucking company's books. And Gerald, I've got to tell you, there are some serious problems we need to address." I just stared at him. I'd almost died, spent 3 days unconscious, and his opening line was about problems with my business. What kind of problems? Tyler pulled out a folder, thick with documents. Cash flow issues, outdated equipment, maintenance costs that are eating into profits. Plus, the whole industry is about to be disrupted by autonomous vehicles and AI-powered logistics platforms. He spread some papers across my hospital bed table like he was dealing cards. The good news is, our tech startup is perfectly positioned to help traditional transportation companies transition into the digital age. We just need some initial capital to get the platform fully developed. I looked at the papers. Even through my medication fog, I could see these were loan documents. Big ones. Tyler was trying to get me to sign a $5 million line of credit against Pierce Transportation. You want me to borrow $5 million to fund your computer app? It's not just an app, Pops. It's a comprehensive logistics solution that's going to revolutionize how freight moves across America. Our investors are projecting a 10 times return within 24 months. Tyler leaned closer, his voice dropping to what he probably thought was a persuasive whisper. Look, Gerald, I'll be straight with you. Margaret and Carol are worried about your ability to handle the stress of running the business after this heart attack. They think maybe it's time to bring in some professional management. Professional management? Me? I've got the MBA, the tech background, the connections with venture capital, and let's face it, you're not getting any younger. This health scare should be a wake-up call. I felt something cold settle in my stomach that had nothing to do with the hospital food. Where exactly are Margaret and Carol? Why aren't they here having this conversation with me? Tyler waved his hand dismissively. They're dealing with some personal stuff. Carol's been pretty emotional about your condition, and Margaret's been holding down the fort at home. They asked me to handle the business side of things. He tapped the loan documents with his finger. This is really just a formality. The company needs capital injection whether you're running it or not. But if you sign now, we can fast-track the development timeline and start seeing returns by next quarter. Something about the whole situation felt wrong. Tyler's eagerness, the convenient timing, the way he kept pushing these papers at me while I was barely conscious. My Marine training had taught me to trust my instincts, and right now every instinct I had was screaming that I was being played. I need time to think about this, I said, pushing the documents back toward him. Tyler's smile flickered for just a second. Of course. But Gerald, time is really a factor here. The investors are only holding their offer open for another week. After that, who knows when we'll get another opportunity like this. He gathered up his papers and snapped his briefcase shut. I'll leave these with you to review, but don't wait too long. Markets move fast these days. After he left, I lay there staring at the ceiling tiles and thinking. Tyler had visited once in 3 days, spent 10 minutes talking about business deals, and hadn't once asked how I was feeling or what the doctors had said about my recovery. Margaret and Carol hadn't visited at all, not once. Their husband and father had nearly died, and they couldn't be bothered to drive 20 minutes to the hospital. But Tyler sure was eager to get his hands on $5 million of my money. I reached for the phone beside my bed and dialed a number I'd memorized years ago. Leonard Brooks' law office. Leonard, it's Gerald Pierce. I need you to come to St. Mary's Hospital as soon as you can. And Leonard, bring everything you can find about conservatorship law and financial fraud. I think my family's trying to steal my business while I'm flat on my back. Leonard Brooks showed up at my hospital room the next morning, looking like he'd been practicing law since the Civil War. He was one of those attorneys who had earned his reputation the hard way, handling cases for working men who didn't have corporate legal departments backing them up. Gerald, you look like hell, he said, pulling up a chair beside my bed. But you sound suspicious, which usually means you're thinking clearly. I told him about Tyler's visit, the loan documents, and the way my family had basically disappeared since my heart attack. Leonard listened without interrupting, occasionally jotting notes in his leather portfolio. Here's what we're going to do, he said when I finished. I'm going to have my investigator Frederick Stone do a deep dive into your son-in-law's activities. Financial records, business dealings, the works. If he's planning something, we'll find it. How long will that take? Give us a week, maybe 2. In the meantime, don't sign anything. Don't make any business decisions. Just focus on getting healthy and let us handle the detective work. 2 weeks later, I was back home and supposedly recovering when Leonard called me with news that made my blood pressure spike higher than my cardiologist would have liked. Gerald, you need to sit down for this. I'm already sitting. Your son-in-law has been very busy while you were laid up. He's managed to get himself added as an authorized signatory on 3 of your business accounts. He's been diverting maintenance funds and insurance payments into personal investment accounts. And Gerald, there's more. Leonard paused, and I could hear papers rustling in the background. Tyler's got himself a girlfriend, a 23-year-old named Brianna Foster, who works as a cocktail waitress downtown. He's been funding her lifestyle with money from your company accounts. The room started spinning, and it wasn't from my heart medication. How much money are we talking about? Best we can calculate, about $800,000 over the past 18 months. New BMW for the girl. Downtown apartment that costs more per month than most people make in a year. Jewelry, trips to Las Vegas and Miami. Your son-in-law's been living like a rock star on your dime. I set the phone down for a minute and stared out my bedroom window at the suburban street where I'd lived for 20 years. Houses with two-car garages and manicured lawns, where families were supposed to stick together and look out for each other. Leonard, there's something else I need to tell you. Before you called, I installed some security equipment around the house. Cameras in the common areas, audio recording devices, all legal since it's my property. What kind of things have you recorded? Conversations between Tyler and my wife about my declining mental state. Discussions about how I'm too old and stubborn to make good business decisions anymore. Margaret talking about how embarrassed she is that her friends know she's married to a truck driver. I could hear Leonard writing furiously. Gerald, I want you to make copies of everything. Every recording, every video, every piece of financial documentation you can get your hands on. And I want you to be very careful around your family. If Tyler's stolen $800,000, he's not going to give up easily when his scheme gets exposed. The next few days were like living in enemy territory. I played the role of the recovering heart patient, weak and dependent, while Tyler and Margaret made plans around me like I wasn't even there. I watched Tyler work his manipulation on Carol, convincing her that I was having memory problems and mood swings. He told her the stress of running the trucking company was going to kill me, and the only way to save my life was to take control of the business away from me. Your father's not thinking clearly, I heard him tell her during one of their kitchen conversations. The heart attack affected his brain. Dr. Patterson says it's common in men his age. Cognitive decline, paranoid thinking, inability to make rational decisions. Dr. Patterson had never said any such thing because I'd never discussed my mental state with him. But Tyler was building a narrative, creating a paper trail that would justify what he was planning to do. The breakthrough came when Frederick Stone called me with photographs that made me want to drive straight to Tyler's downtown love nest and throw him off the balcony. Pictures of Tyler and Brianna at expensive restaurants. Tyler signing a lease for her apartment with a check drawn. On my business account. Tyler buying her a BMW with money that was supposed to go to my driver's health insurance premiums. There's more, Frederick said. Your son-in-law's been in contact with some Silicon Valley investment people. They specialize in acquiring traditional transportation companies and optimizing them for efficiency. What kind of optimizing? The kind where they sell off the truck fleet, fire all the drivers, and subcontract everything to automated logistics platforms. They want to buy Pierce Transportation for pennies on the dollar, strip it for parts, and leave your 200 employees without jobs. And Tyler's helping them? Tyler's the one who reached out to them. He's been providing inside information about your company's finances, maintenance schedules, driver contracts. He's essentially been setting up a hostile takeover from the inside. I hung up the phone and sat in my home office, surrounded by 3 decades of trucking industry awards and photographs of drivers who'd trusted me with their livelihoods. Tyler wasn't just stealing from me. He was planning to destroy everything I'd built and put 200 families out of work, so he could cash in on some tech investor's get-rich-quick scheme. That night, I made a decision. If Tyler wanted to play hardball, I'd show him how a Marine who'd survived Iraq handles combat. But this wouldn't be fought with weapons or violence. This would be fought with evidence, documentation, and the legal system. I called Leonard Brooks and told him to prepare what he called the nuclear option. The nuclear option was a legal strategy Leonard had developed for situations where family members tried to steal everything from someone through conservatorship fraud. It involved transferring all assets into an ironclad trust structure that would protect them from any legal challenge while simultaneously exposing the criminals who were trying to commit the theft. Once we pulled this trigger, Gerald, there's no going back. Leonard warned me. Your family will wake up tomorrow morning with zero access to your money, your property, or your business. Are you absolutely sure about this? I thought about Tyler stealing $800,000 to support his girlfriend while my drivers went without proper health insurance. I thought about my wife and daughter planning to have me declared mentally incompetent so they could sell my life's work to Silicon Valley vultures. Do it. The next morning, Tyler, Margaret, and Carol showed up at my house with serious expressions and a folder full of legal documents. They'd scheduled what Tyler called a family intervention to discuss my mental health and the future of the business. Tyler took the lead, which didn't surprise me. He'd been orchestrating this whole operation from the beginning. "Gerald, we're all concerned about you," he began, settling into my own recliner like he owned the place. "The heart attack, the stress of running the company, the way you've been acting lately. Dr. Patterson says this kind of paranoid behavior can be a sign of cognitive decline after a major cardiac event." I almost laughed. Dr. Patterson had never examined me for cognitive problems, but Tyler needed a medical opinion to support his conservatorship petition. Margaret jumped in right on cue. "You've been questioning perfectly normal business decisions, checking the accounts obsessively. Yesterday you accused Tyler of stealing money. That's not the Gerald I married." Carol was sitting there with tears in her eyes, playing the role of the concerned daughter perfectly. "Dad, we just want what's best for you. Maybe it's time to step back and let Tyler handle the day-to-day operations while you focus on your recovery." Tyler slid the legal documents across my coffee table. "These are temporary guardianship papers, nothing permanent, just giving me legal authority to make business decisions while you get the medical help you need." I opened the folder and pretended to read. Through the conservatorship papers that would strip me of all legal control over my assets, my business, and my personal affairs. And if I refused to sign, Tyler's smile never wavered. "We'd hate to pursue this through the courts, but we have Dr. Patterson's evaluation of your mental state. We have documentation of your erratic behavior, your paranoid accusations, your inability to make sound financial decisions. We just want what's best for you, Dad," Carol added, right on script. I looked at these three people sitting in my living room, planning to steal my life's work while I watched, and I realized they'd made one critical mistake. They thought I was a broken-down old man who'd give up without a fight. "Well," I said, setting the papers aside, "before I make any decisions, there's something all of you should probably see." I turned on the large-screen TV, mounted on my wall, and connected my laptop. The first video that came up showed Tyler and Brianna Foster at an expensive restaurant, feeding each other dessert and laughing about how easy it was to steal money from the old man. Margaret gasped. Carol's face went white. Tyler started to stand up, but I wasn't finished. The next video showed Tyler meeting with the Silicon Valley investors, explaining how he could deliver Pierce Transportation for a fraction of its actual value once he gained legal control through the conservatorship. "Tyler," Carol whispered, staring at the screen. "Who is that woman?" But I was already playing the audio recordings from their kitchen conversations, where Tyler had coached both women on what to say about my supposed mental decline and how to split up my assets once they gained control. That's when Leonard Brooks walked in through my front door, followed by 2 FBI agents. "Tyler Davidson," Agent Martinez said, "you're under arrest for financial fraud, money laundering, and elder abuse." The handcuffs clicking shut around Tyler's wrists was the sweetest sound I'd heard since my heart monitor flatlined during surgery. Carol was screaming at Tyler about the other woman. Margaret was demanding to know how much money he'd stolen, and Tyler was trying to explain that it was all a misunderstanding while being read his Miranda rights. "What happens to us now?" Margaret asked, after Tyler had been dragged away. "Now you figure out how to live without my money," I said calmly. "The house, the cars, the country club membership, all of it belongs to the Ironwood Trust now. And the trust has very specific rules about who gets to benefit from it." "What kind of rules?" "The kind that exclude people who try to commit conservatorship fraud against the trust's creator." Tyler got 7 years in federal prison. Carol divorced him and got half of nothing, since Tyler's assets consisted entirely of debt from his failed tech ventures. Margaret tried to fight the trust in court, but judges tend not to be sympathetic to people who get caught on tape planning to have their husbands. Declared mentally incompetent for financial gain, I sold Pierce Transportation to my drivers through an employee stock ownership plan that guaranteed their jobs and their pensions. They'd been loyal to me for decades. It was time to return the favor. As for me, I bought a small ranch in Montana where I work with my hands again, fixing fence posts and caring for horses. The other day, my neighbor's grandson brought his broken bicycle over. I spent an hour in my workshop getting it running perfectly. When I handed it back to him, he grinned and said, "Thanks, Mr. Pierce. You're the best." That's when I realized something important. For the first time in years, someone appreciated me for what I could do, not what I could provide financially. My heart is stronger now than it's been in years, not because of the surgery, but because it's finally free from people who never deserved it. They wanted me gone so they could have my money. I gave them exactly what they wanted. I disappeared. But I took the checkbook with me, and I've never been happier. True family isn't defined by blood or marriage certificates. It's defined by who shows up when you're dying on a garage floor, and who values you for the man you are, not the size of your bank account. Sometimes the greatest act of love you can give yourself is walking away from people who only see you as a wallet with legs, because a life built on genuine respect is worth more than all the money in the world.